Welcome everyone. If you're new here, let me introduce myself. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. And if you've been around for a while, you're probably thinking, I didn't know Jason knows woodworking. That's because I don't. This bad boy right here is kind of in the toy I've been teasing for the past couple of videos where I talk about I had a giant yellow and black box that was, this high or so. But it's something I've always wanted to get into. And eventually the end goal here is to build a pretty epic tabletop gaming table because, this is the Tabletop Battlefield and all. But before I get there, I got, a long ways to go. So I thought I'd start with a much simpler project. And this is a project that doesn't really require a lot of skill. It doesn't have to look beautiful. And precision, well, that's just kind of optional. You just kind of do things pretty rough. But it's some custom design racks for storing cosplay supplies. You can see I got my foam in one of them, and I got a little insert over here for some of the foam rods and plenty of space to store things coming up for future builds. But anyway, let me get back to my different outfit and get back to working on the saw and cutting some more pieces up. The one part about this build, not going over this video, is the details of all the shapes and sizes, all that kind of stuff. You can find a link for that down in the show notes of the video where I have a PDF document over on tabletopbattlefield.com that's got all that information for you if you're interested in the exact specifications of these racks. Now, due to the structure of wood, when you want to glue one of the end pieces of a board just like this, or where you've done a cut with a miter saw, this end is very porous. So the trick here is to first apply just basically a mixture that's 50% water and 50% glue and let that dry. That'll seal the board up, so now your joint will be as strong as it normally would. So let's carry on with the build process by gluing the side frames all together. When it comes to woodworking and kind of gluing pieces together, remember clamping is always very important. So up until this point, we've been doing things pretty well by the book. But now the glue is dry, it's time to go ahead and, we're going to go a little bit of max power on you. Now the proper way to put some screws in here, since I kind of did some math wrong and realized 2.5-inch screws won't go through 3.5-inch 2x4s, would probably be to use pocket hole joints. But I don't have a pocket hole jig, which is the right way to do them. Fortunately, this isn't a nice, good-looking piece of furniture. It's a hastily built rack for storing things. I'm just going to drill some pocket holes by hand and put the screws right in there, and it should work all right for this project. So I want to take a moment here to talk about the miter cuts for this project. You need 2 of them for each of the side braces. Now one of them is a pretty easy cut at about 23 degrees, and pretty much any miter saw, chop saw out there can do that kind of a cut. The other one then, if you do the math, 90 minus 23 is 67. Now most miter saws probably can't, if any, can actually do that kind of a cut. Now this one cannot. Now there are ways you can get these miter saws to cut steeper angles. You can find videos of this on YouTube where you basically make a jig out of wood, you do a pre-cut angle, and then you can kind of do some math to figure out how to cut a larger angle. However, the important thing here is oopsies do happen, like this one. And you can see what happened there is the piece that I was cutting broke off. It flew up and actually broke off a piece of the dust collection unit here on the saw. Now at the moment I don't have a proper setup running yet, so it's not that big of a deal, and it is a fairly easy piece to replace. But the moral of the story here is things like that can happen with the saw, even if you're not necessarily doing something wrong per se, because you hit a little variation in the wood or something like that and it causes some kickback. But the best defense you have when using a miter saw like this in terms of not getting injured is to make sure the piece you're cutting is firmly clamped and secured up against the saw. And the problem with these jigs, like what I was using in that video there, is that it makes them very difficult to properly secure your piece down, which, obviously puts you in a bit of a dangerous situation. So one takeaway, just keep in mind if you're starting out with woodworking, and just in general with woodworking, if something does seem a little bit dangerous, it probably is, and you may want to try something else. So using another tool like a jigsaw or something to cut these steep miters, that might not be a bad idea. Now here's another little trick when it comes to actually clamping these miters in place, is you want to use the scrap pieces that you cut off. You kind of brace them in between the clamps, and that helps these clamps secure down, because let's face it, these types of clamps really aren't good at securing angled surfaces. They really want two parallel surfaces to be basically clamping together. Now it's time to move on to final assembly. I got my two side pieces set up here with the screws facing inward. I'm going to take my 1x12, which makes up the base, and I'm going to attach that piece to the bottom of these sides with some glue, as well as 1 1/4 inch long screws. From this point on, when you're inserting screws, be careful to make sure you're not drilling the holes right in the path of screws you've already put in the wood, because that would be a very bad thing. Now let's repeat the process for both the front and back supports. The last step is going to be to attach the feet. Same process here, glue them up, clamp them down, and put a few screws in them. This time I'm going to kind of put some angled screws coming in from the inside going towards the outside. And with that, we can pretty much call this build done. Now, when I take one more look at the final piece here, you're going to see that at least on the side of the one larger rack, I do have this little insert I have sitting there that's used for containing foam rods or anything small like that. Now the process of building this piece is basically the same. You're going to go ahead, cut some pieces down, glue some things together, clamp them in place, and secure everything with screws. If you want to see the dimensions of that piece, you can find that in the download of kind of the plans I mentioned earlier in the video. So once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. I got some more woodworking projects coming up in the not too distant future, and we're going to be getting back to building the Fallout 4 laser rifle here probably next week. So thanks for watching. Hit subscribe if you want to see more of this. Like, share, blah, blah, blah. You're probably all sick of that crap, and so am I. So until next week, have a good night.